So I wanted to talk about PCI, and there's a number of reasons why I want to take a few minutes and discuss PCI and kind of their impact on the broader community and the broader security space. And I want to make it very clear, I have not been kind to PCI, the payment card industry, like at all over the years. And I feel like they earned it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I absolutely feel like they deserved all of the vile things that I've said about them, specifically around password complexity. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. And but they constantly get better. They're like somebody that's just really sucks at something, and they just keep working and working and working. And now they're getting to the point where it's like, damn, I'm impressed. You all have came a really, really, really long way through the different versions of PCI that have come out over the years out there as well. So it's just absolutely super cool to see where they're at right now in relation to how it is related to testing. And that brings up what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on PCI 11.4 predominantly for this webcast today, and that is the area of PCI dealing with security testing. There is a lot of changes to PCI. In fact, I have this document over here. I actually have the old document. We're going to be coming over here quite a bit, but this is the change log between PCI 3 and PCI 4. And it's substantial, y'all. There's a lot that PCI has changed between 3.2.1 and 4.0. And I'm going to share this link with you all because it is a full, good, cool document. I'm going to put it over in resources in the slides just so you can get it there and it's not going to disappear into the ether. And then I'm also going to be spending a lot of time in the actual PCI 4.0 document itself today. So we can kind of walk through how they're discussing things in there. And it's kind of important for you because there's a lot of articles out there that are talking about how, like, what is PCI? And they give like 5 or 6 bullet points. And then they basically say, if you're interested in a PCI audit and you need to talk to PCI experts, you should talk to us. And they don't really like copy and paste the actual wording of PCI. They're kind of vague about what PCI actually says. And I really like the idea of going straight to the document to read exactly what it says. And kind of the layout of the way PCI has it is great, right? Defined approach requirements, what are the testing procedures, and then overall guidance for that specific requirement that you have in there, right? So this is just really good. And it's like a penetration testing methodology is defined, documented, and implemented by the entity and includes, let me go to full screen on this. Let's make this a little bit bigger. There we go. I got to do one more here. Let's do this. That's not doing what I wanted to do, whatever. But it's nice that they give you kind of that 3 columns, right? What is the requirement? What is the defined approach? What is the guidance for actually meeting that specific requirement? It kind of has a lot of this because you can achieve that specific objective and you can do it in a variety of different ways as far as your own customized approach, but you have to focus on that objective that you're trying to get to. So I I'm going to focus on the testing section because there is a lot, like a crazy amount of, oh, we had a Tamaria. Oh, are we back though? Mm-hmm. All right. All right, we're back. That's good. I don't know if you know this, but something like solar flares or something bringing down AT&T's network. Who knows if it's going to impact webcasts as well. Let's hope so. All right. So I want to focus on the testing because it's a big document and there's big changes in the testing section, which I think is interesting because a lot of the articles and the other talking heads, when they're talking about changes in the testing component, they're like, oh, there's not that many changes in testing. And I think a lot of the changes in the testing portion of PCI 4.0 are fairly seismic in the way that they're being presented. We'll talk about wireless. I think that's a fairly big deal, but specifically like the methodology, how that's being documented, doing internal scans that require authentication to do authenticated scans. And then things like you have to address all vulnerabilities, or at least have them listed up in your risk register. And I'll talk more about that as we go through this presentation. out there as well. So yes, and I'm also going to cover some things that I think we need as an industry to kind of establish some interpretations around, specifically as it relates to third-party cloud providers and SaaS providers and PCI calling them out specifically in their need to support testing activities. And we'll discuss that in a lot more detail as we go through that as well. And plus, the other stuff is just, it's boring. Like, it's just not interesting to me. There's so much in there that's like, how things are supposed to be documented, definition of what a CDE is and the boundary and the enclaves of all of those different things. And it's just like, yeah, this isn't relevant to my interests. I'm really interested in pen testing, super interested in security assessments and how we're evaluating the security controls for organizations. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not important. It just means I don't care as much. But we absolutely do have people that care about those things and care about them deeply. And we can talk about them in other webcasts, but I really want to focus on the testing section. However, there is an exception, y'all. If you have been around me for any period of time, we have lots of people that have been on like 10 plus webcasts. If you've been around, you know that one of the biggest gripes I had with PCI is their password complexity requirements. Like, damn near unforgivable. I think it's probably the reason why I just really was angry at PCI. And I'm going to do the same thing that I've done for a number of webcasts and presentations and training classes over the years. I mean, we're talking like since PCI started and they're establishing password complexity requirements, they weren't just wrong. They were detrimentally, like grievously, like negligent, gross negligence, wrong with the password complexity requirements. So if you look at PCI password complexity requirements, this is what they were. All right. This is what they were. Passwords or passphrases must have a minimum of 7 freaking characters. Like, this is a joke to me, and it has been a joke to me for a decade, maybe a decade. Longer. Okay. Yeah. Longer. It's just, this is just like the gift that keeps on giving. Supernaut is like 7 characters. That's so 20. No, it's not 2018. You're off by 40 years. I think my math might be off on that.
I don't ever remember it being below 8 for anybody real.
Anywhere except PCI. Like, it's bad, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm hoping for the last time. If you look at the NIST Green Book, let's see if we can go to the NIST Green Paper.
The last reference to the NIST Green Book ever to be made.
Oh, no. This might, they might have changed the thing. I've got to find the original NIST Green Book.
It's off the internet.
Passwords. Maybe they took it down. They're like that John guy. So here is the NIST Green Book recommendations. And it basically, I'll just kind of paraphrase it because I've talked about it for so many times. Maybe this is it. Yep, this is it right here. Found it. All right. So this came out in 1985. 1980 freaking 5. Okay. Like, you think about Care Bears, you think about Teddy Ruxpin, you think about boom boxes, like all of that. Like, this is it. 1985. Okay, y'all. And in 1985, the NIST Green Book gave us some requirements associated with like how we should set up our passwords. L is set for 6 months and 12 months. P is set for 1 in 1 million. Acceptable probability for guessing the password. R is set at 8.5 guesses per minute. The guess rate possible on a 300 baud service. A 300 baud service. So think war games, the little phone going on the thing. That was a 300 baud service. Okay.
I would think you're saying foreign words to people here. They don't know what this.
They don't know, but that's okay. Can somebody post a picture of what a modem looked like in 1985? Because you would have a rotary phone. Okay, we're going to need a picture of a rotary phone. And that rotary phone would have, like, the receiver would have a cable. Okay, we're going to need a picture of a cable. So we're going to need a picture of a rotary phone with a cable. Okay. And then we're going to need a picture of what a modem was like in 1985. Can someone post that from War Games? I think that would be the best picture. All right. That's not the right modem, Plumbing. That's not it. That's not the 80s. There we go. Thomas got it. right there. That's what a modem looked like in 1985. And that's what NIST was worried about insofar as somebody trying to brute force and hack a password is using a 300 baud modem, which is a dial-up rotary phone, to do that attack. All right. And they came up with this chart right here on how long the passwords should be, right? Whether you should use, if you're using a 26 character password with an alphabet, 36 character alphabet, and the minimum password length from NIST in 1985 was 8 characters, because they were worried about the Russians brute forcing passwords over a 300 baud service. Their logic was, we need to change our passwords every 6 months if they're 8 characters, because it's possible for the Russians to try every permutation of every possible password within a period of time, like 6 months. If you applied this same logic today, you would have to change your password every 0.6 seconds. NIST set it at 8 characters in 1985. PCI, and I can't remember when PCI came out with the first password complexity standards, looked at the NIST standards and they said, ooh, that's too rich for my blood. No, 8 character passwords, everybody. I think what we need to do is we need to stick with 7 character passwords.
Let's keep it reasonable.
Let's keep it reasonable, right? Like, we can't let the 80s dictate what we do today, right? And that's what NIST stuck with up until PCI, sorry, that's what PCI stuck with until PCI 4. So I am super excited that they updated their password requirements. Can we do celebration on like on Discord? Let's pop some confetti. Let's get some applause going. We got the cornucopia. We got all of this stuff. So much win. Thank you, PCI. Thank you so much for fixing this standard. And then we get to what the God damn it. Like, just what are, oh, Jesus. All right. So this is what PCI has changed it to. They went from 7 to effing 12. 12 characters. 12 characters. And like PCI 4.0 is in effect at the end of this March, 2024, not the password complexity requirements. No. Pump the brakes there, Sparky. That doesn't go into effect until 2020 freaking 5. Like, all of the organizations get like an extra year because this is too onerous for them to be able to implement on this. Like, what the hell? Oh my God. Okay. So if you're implementing the PCI standards and you're at PCI and you're working on the password stuff, I still don't like you. We're still not friends. This can still be resolved. You can change it. They call it an evolving requirement. You can evolve it to like 15 characters. You totally can. You can do that. You absolutely should. Now, I have had people from the PCI Mafia reach out to me. Like, and I'm not even exaggerating. This has happened. They have contacted me and they've said, well, Mr. Strand, you need to understand that there are computer systems that people are using that don't support password complexity requirements greater than 8, like Solaris systems, or you may have AS400s at the heart of the banking and financial institutions. Don't make your compliance requirements for the exceptions. They should be exceptions for a reason. Make them 15 characters. And that forces that organization to create an exception, document that exception, accept the freaking risk for that exception. And we now can have a conversation about replacing ancient AS400 and Solaris Spark 7 systems in your environments, because that conversation needs to happen. All right. It needs to happen now. Also, kind of riffing on this some more, PCI is talking about MFA. And a lot of people in the PCI space, whenever they talk to me from the PCI Mafia, they say things like, well, dude, we can do 12 characters if it's using multi-factor authentication. No, Anytime that you're working on a compliance standard, right? If you're in a room and it's a star chamber and all the people are wearing funny hats, it's like the Council of Infinite Ricks and Rick and Morty, and you're coming up with a compliance standard in this star chamber, and somebody's like, hey, can we reduce this security by implementing this other security control on top of it? The answer should always be no. And that person should be kicked off of that panel. And that person, I'm just going out on a limb here, should lose their CISSP. Like, it should be automatic revoke of CISSPs if you stand up and you're like, well, let's reduce the password complexity requirements because we got MFA. And the reason why is the only way I would be okay with that is if you can ensure that multi-factor authentication is implemented in every possible place it can be, at the workstation, on the network, all of the APIs, all the different calls. And here's the deal. You cannot guarantee that. In the vast majority of organizations, they have MFA, and that's great, gold star, but there's always something that doesn't require MFA in that organization. So if you're reducing the password complexity requirements because of MFA, MFA is not going to be implemented somewhere. And as an attacker, we're going to take advantage of that, and we're going to break into the organization utilizing that. Okay, so pretty please, for the love of all that's holy and right in the universe, don't allow PCI to get away with this. And if you're at PCI, call me. I'll be nicer. I'm ranting because it's pretty much performative outrage. But when we're looking at this, and we can have like real good conversations with people that are actually doing security assessments, breaking into places, MFA is a step in the right direction. Getting rid of 7 characters is a step in the right direction. But you can be the person or people at PCI that can make it great. Go to 15 characters, require MFA for standard user accounts, especially on external systems. This is awesome. As Scott just pointed out, the 80s called and they want their password complexity requirements back. Absolutely. All right. I look at this like password thing with PCI is it's like a pet cemetery. It just refuses to die. I've also had people, once again, totally not joking, come up to me and say, dude, you got to stop calling out PCI. There's people at PCI that are frustrated with you and they're going to come after you. And it's like, why am I afraid of anybody that's coming up with PCI standards? Like, it's going to be like some kind of geek fight where we slap each other, or are they going to end my career? Okay. Yeah. Good luck.
What about mine? I'm the one with the QSA.
You're the one with the QSA, right? They'll come after CJ. So pretty please, we need to do better. We need to do better. Okay. And this is one of those things I'm going to get back into testing, because overall, when it comes to PCI and all of these changes, except for passwords, you're not cool. Everything else that we've seen in PCI is, I just got cut out. You all hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. I just heard the thing. Somebody just pointed out, they said, to be fair, at least PCI says it's a minimum standard. All right. You can go ahead and you can increase it to whatever you want. You're right. But the problem with the minimum standard is it is the standard. And we deal with organizations all the time at Black Hills Information Security that set that minimum across their organization because it is a standard and they refuse to go above that. An example, a number of years ago, we were doing a pen test against an organization. It was a PCI pen test. The tester was able to get domain administrator, dump the passwords. They were able to crack the passwords on that organization, and they were able to crack 86% of all of the passwords in that organization. We put it as a critical vulnerability because their password complexity was 7 characters. That organization argued with us, and they said, no, this cannot be a critical because we've met the minimum for PCI. Do you see how that becomes a problem? Where it's like, it's a minimum, and then everybody strives to meet the minimum. They don't try to go above the minimum, and then they try to defend their actions in meeting the minimum. Empower your IT administrators in the world. Empower your security administrators in the world, PCI. Give them that 15-character password. Alphanumeric special character is fine. Don't go overboard. 15 characters. And then have organizations document their exceptions and why they're having those exceptions instead of doing it the other way around. All right, well, let's move on. I want to talk about some good things here. I really, really want to talk about some good things. Just got to reset. I need that little palate cleanser. I need like lemon for my fingertips to kind of get ready, something to cleanse, maybe some sorbet. All right. Because this gets cool. All right. In 11.2.1, they talk about the importance of wireless. Now, this gets back to how a documented standard is written and how organizations implement that and how we test and validate that as well. So for a lot of organizations, because they have a policy of no wireless, they don't want to test wireless. They don't test wireless because they don't have a policy of wireless. Therefore, for a third party, they don't want to hire the third party to test and validate they don't have wireless. It's basically, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. All right. So somebody just said, I believe the lower standards are kept because PCI is being enforced on all merchant accounts, even those that don't even have a means to input password functionality. I agree. Fine. It's a great reason. I don't care. Force organizations to go to a higher standard and then document those weak exceptions as weak exceptions. Don't try to make your standard to the worst possible setting for the exceptions. Don't make the exceptions the rule. All right. So when we're looking at this for wireless, I love this, right? Now you have to have a policy for looking out for authorized and unauthorized wireless access points, which is just beautiful. This is getting into the heart of good security, right? Because we ran into a lot of organizations out there. They would basically say, hey, we aren't going to test any wireless because our policy says no wireless. And sometimes during our pen test, we would start to test wireless and we would find wireless. CJ's on. Years ago, CJ and I worked together at a defense contractor. And CJ, I think it's safe to say there's pretty stringent rules against not having wireless access points in SCIFs, right?
I think that's fairly accurate. Yeah.
I think that's fairly accurate. And we still did wireless audits where we would walk around the campus and we'd look for wireless access points, or WAPs, as I like to call them. Go ahead, CJ.
And find them.
And find them. 2 cases where we found them. The first one we found them as I was doing a wireless survey and I was up on Mahogany Row. I don't know if your organization has a Mahogany Row. It's where the executives live and their doors are awesome wood and they're just super awesome, great, mahogany doors, mahogany desks. It smells rich, right? Like it's an amazing place. And I picked up a wireless signal on the executive level of a classified area inside of a SCIF. I went into the office of one of the executives because I had that wireless signal, and immediately like the executive assistant was like there with like kung fu, and she was like, you shall not pass. And I'm like, well, I'm here doing a wireless audit. It's what we have to do for our security certifications as part of the government's requirements for securing it. I've got a wireless signal. We need to look into it. So they let me go in and I found a wireless access point in an executive's office on his desk. I went in, talked to him, very nice gentleman. And I said, hey, can't have that. He goes, oh, why? And I'm like, well, we're in a secure facility and it's an air gap network and you have this wireless access point. And that's just like, do you know that we're working on classified things? I mean, you know what we do here, right? And he's like, oh crap, I'll shut it down. Thanks for letting me know. It's just really nice for me to be able to take my computer with me into the bathroom while I'm working. Like that was the thought he had in his head. And then he rationalized that thought. And then he communicated that thought by speaking it to me live, out loud. So yeah, that was one. The other one is CJ and I were decommissioning a SCIF building. We moved all the classified projects. Everything was out of it. And part of what we have to do is we have to sweep the building to find if there's any documents, computing devices, hard drives, things like that left behind. And sure as hell, we found a wireless access point that was stuffed up in above the false ceiling in one of the rooms. Like crazy stuff. And that's an organization that's highly controlled, very, very secure. It should be very, very secure and like very high risk. And we still did wireless audits and we still found situations where people had wireless access points and rogue wireless access points in that organization. So Michael brings up a great point. Michael said, does wireless here include Bluetooth, Zigbee, and proprietary wireless keyboards? Specifically, this particular standard, if you go to 11.2.1, if we go there now, it is very, very, very heavy on, it is very, very, very heavy on 802.11 technologies. Very heavily and like just steeped in wireless technologies. They are not talking about Zigbee. They do not talk about Bluetooth. They do not talk about other proprietary wireless protocols, but they should. That would be one of those things in a future iteration. Talk about other wireless protocols that could be there, but it's very heavily focused on 802.11. So very good questions out there as well. PCI. Okay, now how many times have I heard we don't need a third-party risk analysis because they're FDA approved? Kind of the same thing, right? Kind of the same thing. What else? Execs never heard of SDR attacks. I agree. But that gets into why I'm happy. Look, they're moving in the right direction, folks. Like, I think that we can all agree, acknowledging wireless is a thing, and then circling around and saying, just because you have a policy of not allowing wireless doesn't mean wireless doesn't exist. I love the Frozen Maldador the First. When you're told something is military grade, civilians are like, military people are like, oh God, that is absolutely true. It's heavy and it costs more. All right, and change number 2, authenticated scans. This is great. I really, really love this one because it's starting to change the way that we look at vulnerability scans to, what is it, 11.3.1.2, 11.3.1.2. Here we go, right here. These need to be authenticated for internal systems. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to suck. If you're a PCI environment and you start having to do authenticated scans, it's not going to be pleasant. And the reason why is the number of vulnerabilities that you're going to have to deal with is going to go through the roof. But this had to happen, folks. This had to happen. And the reason why this had to happen is because we have had a number of vulnerabilities. We have had a number of attacks that are not against the external facing ports and services, but against the components that make up the applications and the services that we use, right? Like we had vulnerabilities in things like, I got a couple of here, EXIF tool. EXIF tool is not exposed as a service, but a lot of web service applications use EXIF tool to parse data and pull metadata out of it. And EXIF tool had a remote code execution. Log4j is probably the best example. You just cannot look at these things and say, oh, we're just going to scan and see what's available on the outside of an organization when we're looking for exploits. So many of the vulnerabilities that we have out there are actual component analysis vulnerabilities. This is a game changer. And it is really, really going to impact a lot of organizations. And I'm going to talk about how to handle vulnerabilities because this is not for many organizations. Well, this might be the greatest workload increase for organizations and how they're going to handle their scanning data, doing this authenticated scanning for the internal parts of their networks is right. And as Brian just pointed out, they are trying. Like, this is good. This is good, but it's hard, right? The definition of internal has changed. Internal now means inside the CDE. Yep, that is a very, very good point. Thank you for clarifying on that. Disputing false positives is a pain in the ass. It absolutely is. It's very, very difficult. This is making things more difficult. It absolutely, without question, is. But I think that once organizations start doing this, it gets easier. Maybe I can come up with a better example, but it's been a long few days. I want you to think of it like this, like when you're a kid and you're cleaning your room. You didn't clean your room for like 3-4 months, maybe ever, right? And then all of a sudden you have to clean your room because an aunt's coming over and she's going to sleep in your room. You're going to sleep on the couch and your mom wants you to clean the room. And that first time that you clean your room sucks, right? Like you got to go through everything, throw a bunch of toys away, get all the dirty clothes, all the pizza boxes and everything out. And it's just a disaster and it's really hard to do. But after you get that room clean, it's relatively trivial to keep that room clean moving forward. Not that you do that ever, Like more than likely, you're just going to basically go through and forget it for another 3-4 months. But if you were to put the effort in and do a little bit of cleanup every day, it gets a lot easier to keep up. That's the way it's going to be for many organizations. For the first few iterations that they're doing authenticated scans, it is going to suck. But after they get through that initial pain cycle, it's going to be easier. It just is. And once again, you got to learn to embrace the suck. It is literally our jobs.
Yeah,
Go ahead, CJ.
that is the suck, is that, so that's one of the things we always tell people, is that, look, these are simple things. And then you're like, oh, if it's simple, then it's easy. And that's not the case. This is a simple thing, but this is a discipline. And part of the thing is having that discipline and that tempo, but you've also got to have the staffing and the capability of chasing it down, because some of these environments that are big, I mean, this is just a constant battle. It's going to be never ending.
But you have to start somewhere, right?
But
like we just can't keep ignoring it like we have been,
because it's hard.
Yeah. I think it's easy, but like you said, it requires consistency, and it requires, like, after you get it cleaned up, you have to keep on top of it.
You do have to.
It's like getting a spinning wheel moving, getting a flywheel moving can be really hard. Once it's moving, it gets moved in. James Joyce, habit is the flywheel of society, right?
Yeah, it's the bicycle. You got to keep pedaling.
Yep. So also there's one thing that I don't much care for. It says significant changes require scans, but not authenticated. They specifically call that out in this requirement as well. All right. Another change, all vulnerabilities. This makes my heart glow. I actually am getting like, it's like seriously like choked up by this. Like, I don't understand how the PCI Star Council can allow the password thing to slide, but then this goes through. Like, they've got to have been different groups, right? But this is beautiful. You have to somehow come to grips with all vulnerabilities, not just highs and criticals. Now, if we go through this, it does have, it does say that an organization has to remediate all highs and criticals, but there's a phrase in there that said, based on your organization's risk documentation, like how your organization documents risk. And I think that that's an important delineation. Let me explain. If I say you have to take care of all highs and criticals, then most organizations are just going to fix the highs and criticals that Nessus and Qualys and Rapid7 tell them are highs and criticals. If I say that the highs and criticals have to be defined based on your organization's risk documentation, that's a very different thing. Especially whenever it's coupled with your organization has to assess like all vulnerabilities, lows, informationals, and mediums. And this is something that needs to get perpetuated across every compliance standard. And I think a lot of people don't understand why. The reason why is because Black Hills Information Security, whenever we gain access to organizations, especially externally, or even, doing an internal scan, we aren't popping shells with Metasploit exploits all that often, right? Like going through, finding a critical or high vulnerability, there's an exploit for, then we can use that exploit to gain access to that system, is rare, okay? However, BHIS gaining access to an organization externally or access to resources on the inside of the organization via lows or informationals happens all the time. And I've given a number of examples on this, like through the years. Like whenever you scan a Telnet server, Nessus is going to tell you, hey, that's a Telnet server, but it doesn't parse the banner all that much. So you could totally have a Telnet server that says router pound prompt, which means it's an unauthenticated Telnet server that you can connect to, and you can have like full root level privileges on that device. That happens 2-3 times a year at Black Hills Information Security. Just yesterday, working with one of our testers, we had a couple of situations where lows and informationals were actually highs or criticals. One of them was an FTP server. It was just sitting out there, and it would come up and it'd say, you are currently one out of available 50 people connected to this FTP server at this time. Just say that we probably shouldn't have had access to what that FTP server had access to. In the middle of the testing with the tester, that whole server just disappeared on us, like whoop, gone. The tester contacted the customer and they're like, hey, we were testing, we found this system with this FTP server. What happened? And they're like, oh yeah, could you please disregard that system? There was something bad there, right? That was bad, right? Also on that test, can't remember, it was PHP MyAdmin, or I can't remember what it was, a management interface for software, and it was wide open and completely unauthenticated, right? And that was that was an informational, because the actual vulnerability scanner doesn't understand the context of what that particular software did. So we see these types of vulnerabilities all of the time with this. No, the type of test that we were doing, Ken, was not admin or creds. It was an unauthenticated external scan for that. And we were finding those things, right? So that's kind of the modus operandi and what we find that gets us access at Black Hills Information Security. And I've got to say, you know, I've been teaching this now for over a decade in my classes, whether it was at the SANS Institute, whether it's here at Antisyphon in our training classes, my Pay What You Can classes. We've gotten thousands of people through, had lots of people doing labs, and it just makes me so proud in the industry to see that percolate through in something like PCI, where PCI is like, no, you cannot ignore these medium lows and informationals anymore. And if you're curious about how to do this, right? If you're looking at it and you're like, well, how would one go about doing that? I'm just going to give you a quick tip. Sort by plugin ID or vulnerability. Do not sort by criticality or IP address. Okay. What happens is, if you have, like, let's say you have 1,000 systems, an average of 25 vulnerabilities per system, you have 25,000 vulnerabilities you have to deal with if you're going through one at a time. However, if you flip that and instead look at the number of unique vulnerabilities, you probably have a couple hundred unique vulnerabilities. But those 100 or so vulnerabilities are spread across hundreds, if not thousands, of systems. So by sorting it that way, you come up with a programmatic approach on how you can address those vulnerabilities through Ansible, Puppet, Chef, group policy. So it makes it better and easier for you to actually address those vulnerabilities systematically across most systems. So that's what I teach in the Intro to Security and in the Intro to SOC Core Skills class. I don't want to go into it too much, but you can do it. It makes things easier, makes it easier to address these vulnerabilities. Yes, sort by plugin ID or vulnerability ID, SILAR. And that's a whole nother thing in other webcasts and things like that. All right. Another change, methodology. Once again, this is just moving in the right direction, and I'm so happy for this. And it's kind of gives us some validation at Black Hills Information Security. And by the way, there are other companies that do a great job of doing this as well. And this goes all the way back to, like, you know, the way Ed Scotus back in 2008, 2007 timeframe was teaching pen testing, teaching reporting. And it's great to see that recognized in a standard that's like, nah, this is the way you've got to do it. So let me establish kind of the problem statement. For years, when organizations would do a pen test, in the methodology section, they would just say, we follow penetration testing execution standard, OSTEM or NIST. And that's all that they said for methodology. That's it. And that's kind of garbage. It isn't good, because you would say that, and then you would just list out the different vulnerabilities and the different findings, and you just move on with your life. And the reason why that methodology sucks is it's not a repeatable testing methodology. And what I mean by that is, I can't give a report to you if you're a customer and then go through and have you recreate what I did, right? And there's a number of reasons why that a lot of organizations and pen testing organizations don't do it this way. One of the main reasons why they don't do it this way is because it's hard. It adds in a lot of work, right? The other reason I think that this is crap is some testing organizations out there say, well, if I show them exactly how to do it, I'm giving out our secret sauce of our pen testing company. And that might be a report that ends up out there, and then someone will know what we're doing. I am so sorry you're not that special of a snowflake. Don't think of it that way. I mean, If that makes you feel better, like somehow you're some kind of elite hacksaw, I guess, but that's stupid. Change the way you think, share how you're doing things as much as you possibly can with the customer in that report. This actually becomes really important a little bit later whenever I close out the session. So I wanted to show you, this was actually a report that Fernando provided to us, and he is he's just a phenomenal pen tester at Black Hills Information Security. And this is the report that he provided to us as part of his job interview to come to work at Black Hills Information Security as a pen tester. I got to be honest, if you're like smart and you're like technical and you're good at hacking things and you can't write, I just want you to know that there's like literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people like you. Like, you're not special. You're not wondrous. You're not like brilliant and everybody else is sheep. I can find really smart technical like people any day of the week. But to find really smart technical people that you can also communicate effectively, that makes you a precious snowflake. That makes you a precious unicorn snowflake. And Fernando is a precious unicorn snowflake. So I want to show you kind of what this looks like. This is just a finding in Fernando's report. Okay. So going through and just saying, hey, we have this SQL injection right here and giving recommendations, that's all fine. But then he also went through and said, here's how you can identify this vulnerability and validate this vulnerability with a curl script. Here's how you can document this vulnerability. Here's how you can validate this vulnerability with a bash script. That's awesome, right? And these are just the findings. And he has that validation in here as well. But these are just the findings. As good as these findings are, they're probably better than, I would say, 95% of the pen test reports that I see. But he also has a methodology. And the methodology is not just, I used the NIST methodology. The methodology is showing Fernando's thought process on how he found that vulnerability. So it's going through and it's saying, I initially found the vulnerability by putting in a single tick and I got SQL errors, and he gives us screenshots. Then he has it so you can copy and paste the actual request. Then he builds upon that to the point where he starts getting the data out of that system. Then he builds upon that and shows how he's able to actually gain access to password hashes. Then he builds upon that and he shows how he's able to crack those password hashes as well. So this is important because it's not just saying I used a methodology, but it's documenting your methodology. And what this does is something magical. When we get to the end of a pen test, PCI pen test or whatever, there's very, very, very little time spent on the debrief report. We show up and the debrief report is basically, hey, do you have any questions on the report? There's maybe a couple of questions which we can easily and effectively answer by just going to the methodology. And usually the customer's like, nope, it's all right here. It all looks good. Great job. Thank you so much. The alternative for many firms is if they just give a findings only report, they run into a problem where the customer's like, how did you find this vulnerability? That may seem like it's an easy question, but so many testers are doing so many reports, trying to remember exactly how you hacked something a month or 2 months ago can be really, really difficult. So at BHIS, we're always documenting as we go for 2 reasons. 3, actually. Makes the debrief super easy. Kingsley Panda, we just shared out Fernando's report. White Cyberduck, could you throw that out again? This is not an actual BHIS report, but it's one that he provided to us that has a lot of the same types of DNA in it as
You
well.
would share the Red Siege one, I think.
Oh, the Red Siege one is great too. Tim is from the school of Ed Scotus as well. Really, really good. And Lavender just reshared it out. So that's awesome because it makes things easy from the communication perspective with the customer. It also, when the PCI auditors are going through your pen test report, they can see that methodology as well. What worked, what didn't work, what were the things that you tried, what were the things that failed, and then ultimately what was the process of you achieving an objective of breaking into something. And it makes those meetings with PCI auditors so much easier to deal with. And I think that that's part of the reason why PCI wanted the methodology in here. They wanted to have it fully documented to make life easier for people to kind of replicate the thought process of the tester of what did and did not work. And this is just awesome. At BHIS, it's report as you go. So other testers can pick up if need be, and people can clearly and just simply identify your thought process in doing this test. I will also tell you it makes your job more difficult. It does, because you can't just get shell and then take off the rest of the week, right? You're actually documenting your workflow and the rest of the things you did in that pen test. Multi-tenant service. Okay, we're going to get a little weird here, everybody. We're going to get a little weird, a little bit strange. This is 11.4.7. So let's go to this one right here. All right, so 11.4.7, there's not a lot to it. And I want to put forth like an amicus curiae brief, a friend of the courts or friend of the PCI council, after I lit them up with the password thing, like they're ever going to listen to me. But I think that this is important. All right. So if we're looking at this, it says defined approach requirements, additional requirement for multi-tenant service providers. They didn't want to say cloud providers or SaaS, so they came up with multi-tenant service providers. Multi-tenant service providers must support their customers for external penetration testing per requirements 11.4.3 and 11.4.4. Multi-tenant service providers support their customers' need for technical testing, either by providing access or evidence that compatible or comparable technical testing has been undertaken. That's a customized alternative approach. The other procedure, additional testing procedures for multi-tenant service providers examine evidence to verify multi-tenant service providers support their customers in external penetration testing per the requirements 4.3 underneath 11. Okay. What this is doing is this is PCI telling cloud providers and SaaS providers, you cannot put out a blanket requirement that people cannot test your cloud infrastructure. Notice the phrasing of this is like multi-tenant service providers. That is a phrase that you can drive a Mack truck through. Is it a SaaS provider for a specific service? Yes. Is it a cloud provider that's allowing hosting of AMIs or images? Yes. I think that they were very deliberate, and I think that they were very brilliant in defining it in this way, in an expansive way, to cover any type of provider that does multi-tenant service providers. However, I'm going to push this definition a little bit further. It's not just allowing it to be tested the way I'm kind of like reading this, but they also need to make sure that they're supporting testing activities. I would argue that we all should look at this as though these cloud providers need to support pen testing companies who are scanning from cloud providers legitimately with a contract with a customer, with a contract with a cloud provider. If I'm running scanning through Amazon, Amazon needs to support that type of activity as a pen testing firm. If I'm running scanning from Office 365 or DigitalOcean, they also need to support this activity. And the reason why is we as testers don't have the ability to stand up infrastructure like a botnet, like a hacker would. So we need to utilize cloud service providers for all the wonderful things that cloud service providers offer. We need those same wonderful things, just like companies need cloud, like the ability to do snapshots, the ability to roll back, the ability to quickly recover. Like we need that. I would also go so far as to say, based on the reading of this, if we're doing a really super expansive reading of it, cloud service providers need to continue supporting pen testers that are doing legitimate, authorized, contractual things like spear phishing assessments from cloud providers. And I want to do a special shout out to like DigitalOcean as an example. DigitalOcean has been fantastic to work with. They understand Black Hills information security. Same with, I would say Amazon has been really, really good. Amazon's security team has been great to BHIS as well. We need to make sure that we continue to understand in the industry as a whole that this relationship needs to continue. So I'm really happy that they call this out. And I'm really happy that a lot of the cloud providers are still very supportive of the testing community. But there's a time out there where it's not going to be so wonderful. And we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready for that. All right. So I want to talk about why all this matters and why I'm celebrating this. Aside from the password, little snafu, they're moving in the right direction and that needs to be supported. But overall, I look at the extensive changes that PCI is doing, and I want to do just a huge shout out to PCI DSS, because in addition to not just testing in 11.4, but the whole thing is just solid. Like really good, solid focus on continuing to watch what adversaries are doing and updating your security policies and procedures and processes based on what the adversaries are doing. Just, I'm really proud of all the people at PCI. And I want to say thank you very much. And I also want to say that this does matter. Because if we look at the alternative, like as an example, in the testing space, we have been really, really, really good at trying to define what a good test is. And PCI has been at the forefront of that. And they've been doing a great job of doing things like a PCI, I think it was 3.1. They said a pen test is not an automated scan. Like they call that out point blank. Sorry, Nesascan is not a freaking pen test. Once again, beautiful of PCI to do that. When we look at this and we compare it to incident response and forensic services, you see two paths in the industry. In the industry, Patterson Cake, who has this really great 4-hour workshop that sold out, but it's coming out, we're going to run it again. He's got this quote called the commoditization of IR services. And what has happened in the incident response space is it's been completely dominated by the insurance industry. And by being completely dominated by the insurance industry, it allows the insurance industry to completely dictate the terms and the things that matter to the insurance industry and dictate the quality that comes out of it. So let me go back to 2007, 2008, two classes that won't go and like name. One of those classes was a pen testing class. And that pen testing class spent an extensive portion on day one talking about quality, professionalism, what a good report looks like. And it still does cover that to this day. And most of the people that taught that class hated that section, hated it. But we all taught it because the person behind it was a visionary, still is a visionary, and was absolutely all about what this industry needs to look like in the next 15, 20 years. And we focused on that. We focused on that documentation. We focused on that quality. And now in the industry, things like the pen test puppy mills, they kind of aren't the big firms anymore. If you look at a lot of the big firms, they do a pretty solid job because they've been called out for crap quality and they don't want to be painted with that brush. However, in the forensics community, as far as I know, there weren't any really good classes talking about what quality looked like. It was all about the technical aspects of doing forensics, technical aspects of doing incident response. Not what does the final report look like? And I believe that at that time, we had two separate paths. One of those paths led to an entire industry becoming a race to the bottom, to be as cheap as you possibly can, because it allowed the insurance companies to dictate what they viewed as important, which was cost above all else. And now emergency incident response services are something like $100 to $125 per hour. Most emergency IR services are one person in the United States that is the director or manager of that IR, and they're constantly offshoring all of the work to India. And by the way, I want to do a special call out to the people in India real quick. I'm not saying the people working in India are doing crap work. That's not at all what I want to say. The people that I've seen coming out of India and that have been taking my classes are amazing. They're hardworking. They're brilliant. My hat's off to you. The thing that does bother me, though, is a lot of the security companies are actively taking advantage of people working in India and paying them crap wages so they can keep the cost of tests low. That is exploitive. That is unacceptable. And in that industry, that's what we're looking at. Shove as much as you can, as quickly as you possibly can, get it as cheap as you possibly can, and that's going to bite you in the ass in the long run. Whereas in the testing community, it's been this huge push to try to keep this quality high. So we need to continue to push for quality to remain high. And the forensics industry desperately needs something somewhere from a standard perspective to say methodology and incident response needs to be documented in the same language that PCI put out there, talking about pen testing out there as well. Rayner said, brave of you to think that emergency IR services write reports. I've seen more than a handful of situations where IR services were directed by client legal or insurance to not commit things in writing. Look, I get their reasoning for it, right? You don't want to document because it's going to drive the cost up. And the legal people say you don't want to document because you're going to give the opposing attorneys more ammunition. And even though I can understand those reasons, can't we at least say that that seems like a garbage answer to me? And we need to strive to do better. I agree that that's absolutely something that they do, but I think that a lot of why they're saying that is to cover up like just an absolute standardization of mediocrity in the industry as well. All right. So why this matters also is I believe in the industry, we are literally one standard away from InfoSec Armageddon, right? We are one standard away. That could be NIST, it could be PCI, it could be HIPAA, could be up all of these different things that are out there. Just takes one of them to have the directors talked to by a VC or a private equity funding manager that shows up in like, a Bugatti wearing, $25,000 watch, $10,000 suit, $5,000 sunglasses, and then sits and talks very confidently and competently to a bunch of people that are writing a standard about how artificial intelligence in EDR, artificial intelligence in automated pen testing platforms is rendering the need for individual bespoke pen testing to be completely obsolete. And you need to put it in your standard that says that automated AI-driven EDR or pen testing negates the need for a human being to analyze the data and come up with a conclusion and come up with new attack approaches and methodologies. We're literally just one standard away. And PCI did not fall into that trap. And I commend them for that, right? We don't want the pen test puppies to pen test puppy mills to win. We don't want orgs to only have to fix the top N number of vulnerabilities as determined by CISA. We don't want organizations to buy an automated pen testing platform and save thousands of dollars because you don't have to pay for an external expensive pen testing firm. All of this, I know, is me running through the countryside smashing looms. I get that. But I also understand that AI stuff, it's not going to completely replace a human being. I want to be very clear. I think automated AI-driven pen testing assistance tools are amazing. That's just because the complexity of pen testing is exploding so quickly that we need tools to assist us with our job in identifying vulnerabilities, to find that 80-20 and the Pareto principle to take care of that 80%. But we're always going to have that 20% custom application, custom APIs, custom integration, simple configuration mistakes that a human being is going to have to look at. AI is going to be part of our partnership in the future, moving forward to help us find vulnerabilities, but it's not going to replace us for a long time. It is only a supplemental tool, and we have to remember that as well. And I see PCI 4.0 as just another step in the right direction. And once again, my hat's off to everybody at PCI. You did a great job updating the requirement standards and just some beautiful things in here. And it's rare where I can get on a webcast, I can rant a little bit about passwords, but give just massive kudos to you all about there. One final note, some things that, we're working on, just a quick little bit of marketing. Hey, if you're looking to get training, someone that's looking to get training, folks, we have pay what you can training that you can literally take for free. Please take advantage of that. Find other people to take advantage of that, because I fundamentally believe all of our problems in information security can be solved through education, and education should be accessible for as many people as humanly possible. All right. So I want to see if there's any questions. I know that we're at the end of the hour. If you have to jump off, please, please, please do so. I appreciate the fact that you were here. And I'm going to go through some questions now out there as well.
John, I wanted to bring up that they have the PCI pen testing guidance, which is really good. If you're doing PCI pen testing, that's key. But that's a good document as well. And I would think that that's going to get updated to address some of the things in here.
It needs to, because some of it's in kind of conflict and it's out of date with the current standards and guidance. So I'm waiting for that document to get updated out there as well.
Real quick
ahead.
before anyone leaves, if you were here and you want to get credit for being here today, because once you hit 10 webcasts, we give you a special role and put you in a place called Hack It. You can do that by saying Hack It inside Discord, and we'll make sure that we get you. And I'm dreading it right now because it's a manual process.
I would say let's remind them it's not a bot. It's us.
Yeah, there's no
We're the
bot.
bots.
There's no
Just
bot.
one
It's
time.
manual. And we appreciate it because we
Yes.
go through, we read all the comments, we read all the memes and GIFs and everything else. So,
So
John, there was a
literally-
real quick question here.
Yeah.
How
let's
do you
it.
feel about things like ChatGPT and others helping in the report writing process?
It's just a tool. And this is something we've been talking about at Black Hills Information Security quite a bit. If you're allowing ChatGPT to write your whole report, you're going to have a bad time. That's going to be a bad thing. But if you're using it as a tool to help analyze some data and maybe point you in the right direction, and you got to be careful putting in customer data into those types of tools. That's always something you have to be careful of. That can be a tool. And I think the other thing that people need to understand, they're like, well, you can't use ChatGPT. People use Google all the time, and Google now is powering the search results with Bard. So it's going into an AI training algorithm as well. So we've got to come to grips with that, but it is a tool. Okay. It is absolutely a tool. You have to be careful in how you use that tool. There's some amazing things. That you can
There's
do.
wrong solutions on Google. Go Google something and tell you how to fix
Yeah.
something. You'll
Mhm.
find how to do it wrong too.
Yeah. And that brings up a great point, CJ. Don't trust everything that it tells you blindly. It can be wrong. If you're trying to get some tips and some hints and kind of where you're going, it's great. Just make sure you're not putting customer data in there. That's bad. Okay. So.
Hey, John, there was another really good rant today. I just kind of wanted to, you probably didn't get a chance to see it, but Senator Marco Rubio in Florida said, if you thought the cellular outage was bad, just think what the Chinese can do to our utilities. Very happy to see a senator come up and actually have a rant almost as good as yours, John.
Oh, that's
Almost.
awesome. That's great. I wanted to ask, it looks like the cellular stuff's coming back. People in Discord, have we come up with a reason? Have they came up with an official reason? Solar flares, eSIM database, like what happened? Nothing yet.
Yetis.
What?
Yetis?
Yetis.
Yeti.
Always
Sasquatch.
Yetis.
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch?
Yeti.
Oh shit. It was DNS. It's always DNS. So
It was
What
the
We
other
call them
Sasquatch.
questions?
swamp apes down here.
Coral
Yeah,
Army.
something.
I like that.
what other questions do we got, folks? Do we have here? Somebody says, how do we find the balance between quality pen testing and pen tests that are affordable by SMBs? Robert, stay tuned. I'm currently working with Andrew Morgan in the cyber call. We're trying to address that. And I'm going to tell you, it is hard. And also, I think a lot of it is just training MSPs on how to do testing, like bringing that fire down and getting MSPs so they can do those affordable quality pen tests for their customers. I think is probably the best thing that we can do. Once again, going back to education is the solution on that as well.
John, I
John-
think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Kelly.
go ahead. I was just going to say, John, there was a question. One of our audience members asked, their organization does PCI self-assessment, but she's, I believe she asks as a consultant and says, how do we persuade customers to move away from just a self-assessment and do a proper assessment?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but PCI does give you the ability that you can do self-assessments insofar as the person has to be qualified to do that assessment, correct?
Based on your size and transactions and
Yeah. So, you can kind of work on that, but it goes back to, you never grade or you never final proof your own paper, right? Getting in an outside third party is always a good idea.
I like it.
A couple things. We have the Antisyphon Summit coming up on March 13th. That is a free event, so join us for that. And then just a reminder, sometimes people forget that we're pen testing, Red Team, Threat Hunt, Active SOC, Anti-SOC, PCI, GRC, all that stuff. We have those services. So just in case you thought we were a webcast company.
Or
Or
a
a
t-shirt
t-shirt
company.
Or a t-shirt
Yeah.
company.
Game
Backdoors and
company.
breaches company.
Yeah, just in
We're a
case.
horizontal monopoly, or we're trying very hard to be one.
All right, John, as people need to wrap up, if you had to sum up all of today, and you kind of did that, but like if you had to sum up all of today in just one final thought, what would it be?
This is hope that we're moving in the right direction in the industry, and celebrate this every time it happens.
Oh, I like that ending on a positive note.
It's not how we started before the
No,
pre-show.
it's not.
Um,
A little dark.
Classic Strand. That's a classic Strand move right there.
Yeah.
And we're good, but we could be better.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Mhm.
thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm sure you had more questions, but at some point we need to get going. John, you need to get going. The rest of us should probably get back to work. I mean, this is
This
mine
is-
and Deb's job
Mhm.
for this period of time. It's just
Mhm.
all right. But thank you so much for joining us. If this was your first time on a Black Hills Information Security webcast, which I believe it was for many of you, because I tagged you
Yeah.
this being your first webcast, thank you so much for joining us and come back. The reason why we wanted to do Hack It was because it was like breaking the ice. It was your first maybe post inside Discord. And from this point, you can go to the career chat, you can go to the job hunting chat, you can check out the news. You can engage, you can be a part of this. Stop lurking, like literally stop lurking and get engaged and be a part of this community. So that way you can help share your knowledge with others, because people could benefit from the knowledge that you currently have in your head that you're not sharing. And that's not a guilt trip. It's just a possibility that you can make this world a better place with the knowledge that you have. And that's
Absolutely. Thanks so much, everybody. See you at the
All right.
next webcast.
Bye,
it. All right,
guys.
Ryan, kill a fire, Ryan. Kill it.